Singapore says it's an offence for anyone here to join Ukraine's volunteer foreign fighters in the war against Russia. With the Omicron wave subsiding, how close are we to easing safe management measures? Well, we hear from an expert. And he's unbearably cute, isn't he? Singapore's 7-month-old panda cub is back in the spotlight. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story with me, Hairianto Diman. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss a single episode. It's an offence for any person in Singapore, both Singaporeans and foreigners alike, to travel or try to travel to Ukraine to take up arms in the conflict there. Even if Singapore citizens commit these acts while outside the country, they will be legally deemed to have committed them as if in Singapore, and hence liable for an offence. The Home Affairs Ministry says it's aware that the Embassy of Ukraine here has received calls from persons expressing an interest to join the International Legion for the Territorial Defense of Ukraine, which was set up by Ukraine for foreign volunteers to fight the Russian invasion. MHA advises members of the public who wish to help Ukrainians to do so via legal channels and legitimate organizations like the Singapore Red Cross. And speaking of the SRC, it's sending a second tranche of aid worth $2.4 million to Ukraine, as well as 6 of its neighboring countries that have taken in refugees. On top of addressing basic needs, the aid will help more vulnerable groups like unaccompanied minors, single parents, the elderly and those with disabilities. SRC says its public fundraising appeal has raised close to $3 million since it started on February 25th. This drive will end on May 31st. The foreign ministers of Russia and Ukraine will be meeting face-to-face later today in Turkey. Their Turkish counterpart tweeting that he will be participating in the talks, which will take place on the margins of the Antalya Diplomacy Forum. The discussions will be the first high-level talks between the two countries since Moscow invaded its neighbor. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine enters the third week with no end in sight, could Russian President Vladimir Putin be looking for a way to end the war? Or will the conflict continue for some time? One analyst tells Straits Times that any solution would require some form of compromise.
The most desirable way out is probably some sort of neutrality status for Ukraine with security guarantees involving the European Union, United States, Ukraine and Russia. And I'm really puzzled by the fact that it has never been offered, and neither Ukraine nor its Western friends tried to broker this neutrality solution for Ukraine, which from the humanitarian standpoint would be the best possible option.
Singapore's COVID-19 weekly infection growth rate is below 1 for the 8th straight day, with 17,051 total cases reported last night. Out of the nearly 16,900 local cases, some 14,500 were detected through ART, meaning they were assessed by a doctor to have mild symptoms. The other 2,300 or so were identified via PCR tests. Meanwhile, the number of people in hospital was at 1,513 yesterday. 50 were in ICU and another 187 needed oxygen support. Health Minister Ong Ye Kung told Parliament yesterday that there are good indications that the Omicron wave has peaked and is starting to subside. Let's get an expert's insights with Associate Professor Alex Cook, Vice Dean of Research at NUS's Swee Hock School of Public Health. Professor, in light of what Mr. Ong said yesterday, how close is Singapore to easing safe management measures?
I think they were tantalizingly close. Right now, the number one problem we're facing with COVID is not the number of cases, and it's not even the number of people who are in ICU, which was the worry that we had during the Delta wave last year, but rather is the sheer volume of people who are in hospital because of COVID or with a COVID infection. It's about 1,500 people are hospitalized right now, and to give you a sense, that's more than the number of hospital beds in national university hospitals. So you can imagine both the workload that is imposing on the healthcare workers, as well as the disruption to our other essential services for chronic diseases, for example. Now, this number of people in hospital with COVID will fall as cases fall, and I think it may already be falling. And so I would expect that by the end of March or perhaps the middle of April, the situation in our hospitals should be a lot better. And at that point, the healthcare system would be more ready to cope with any recrudescence of the epidemic as we proceed to relax measures further.
Professor, barring what you've just said, of course, the high number of patients hospitalized, in terms of the severe COVID-19 cases, it is still relatively manageable, at least compared to when it was the Delta variant. Apart from that, we have a high vaccination and booster rate, and the public is becoming more comfortable with home recovery. Now, these seem like favorable conditions for a further reopening. So is Singapore behind the curve in that regard compared with the other countries?
So I think if you look at those other countries which have experienced Omicron already, they waited until after their peak before they started or resumed their reopening. So in our case, our Omicron wave is later than those other countries. Therefore, yeah, we would look at them and say, well, we're reopening later than them, but it's because our Omicron wave has happened later than their Omicron wave was. We do really need to avoid overwhelming the hospitals, the impact that's going to have on the healthcare workers and on the services that we provide. But I do agree with you that if you exclude our hospital situation, actually, yes, we're in a very favorable situation. So I think that once the number of hospitalized cases falls, then we can seriously think about how we're going to reopen over the weeks and months ahead.
Experts like yourself have stressed that we shouldn't focus on the daily case numbers. However, with this top-line figure in the 5 digits now, you mentioned it earlier as well, it means more people are not well enough to work, and that disrupts the workforce, teachers, bus drivers, and even our own colleagues. Will we see our daily numbers drop to pre-Omicron levels?
Yes, there's definitely a lot of impact on the workforce and the economy just now due to the high number of infections, which, bear in mind, is more than the number of confirmed infections that MOH reports, because many infections don't get diagnosed. Well, the case counts will abate, and the question is really, how long is it going to take, and to what level is it going to end up with? Large epidemic waves, when there's no change in policies, they tend to be symmetric, and so it takes about the same time to get from the foothills to the peak as it does to get back down again from the summit back down to the foothills. So if we look at the trajectory this year, and then we mirror that, we would project then that by the end of March, we should be back below 10,000 cases a day, give or take the Tuesday peaks that we always see. And then perhaps by the end of April, we could be back to the level that we had in December. Now, this projection is posited under not being a policy change, not being any behavioral changes. And so if we do reopen before the end of April, which I hope we do, then we would expect to see some resurgence of the epidemic at that point. But because by that time, many of us, probably most of us, will have been infected, any second Omicron wave would likely be a lot smaller than the current one, and therefore would pose little threat to the healthcare system. So at that point, I think, although that there's a risk of new variants or other black swan events, otherwise we should be firmly into the beginning of the endemic stage, where the policies for pandemic mitigation that we currently have are no longer worthwhile and we can drop them.
Professor Cook, always a pleasure to have you and your perspectives. Associate Professor Alex Cook from the Swee Hock School of Public Health at NUS. As part of the Social and Family Development Ministry's efforts to make it easier and quicker for low-income households to access help, families receiving financial aid from the government's key social safety net ComCare will soon automatically qualify for other assistance schemes.
We'll put together a schemes bundle to strengthen support for ComCare families and school-going children, with schools-going children. Once their ComCare applications are approved, they will not need to submit separate applications to access other support schemes like MOE financial assistance covered by the bundle.
MSF is also planning to expand the number of schemes for which ComCare applicants wouldn't need to apply separately, like preschool subsidies, housing and healthcare schemes. For example, by the end of the year, eligible ComCare recipients will automatically be referred to get medical and dental subsidies at certain clinics under the Community Health Assist scheme. The ministers also talked about the deep shift in how MSF delivers social services towards something more proactive, like in the Community Link program, which provides support to about 14,000 families with children living in highly subsidized HDB rental flats. These families will be matched with befrienders. Now, befrienders give support and encourage the family to work towards their short and long-term goals, like owning a flat.
Instead of waiting for clients to turn up at our offices, we want to turn up at their doors, so we can address issues upstream. Hence, we have started scaling up Community Link or ComLink nationwide. Under ComLink, families with children living in public rental housing will be supported by a team of befrienders. They will be the single touch point for these families, journeying with them, nudging them towards longer-term goals.
Let me illustrate how we're translating this paradigm shift into action using a fly-through of a hypothetical ComCare client. Now let's call her Mrs. Tan. Mrs. Tan is a working mother with school-going children, and she recently lost her job. Her first step might be to visit Workforce Singapore to find work, amongst other organizations. But WSG officers don't just help Mrs. Tan look for a job or upskilling opportunities. They also find out about her situation. And when they realize that she's in financial hardship, they will proactively link her up with an SSO, Social Service Office. That's what we're training our frontline officers to do, to identify the various needs of a client beyond their presenting issues and connect them with the relevant support.
A new committee will be tasked to plan enhancements to the existing Project Dian at M-Cube scheme, which helps Malay families in rental flats become homeowners. The committee will involve 8 agencies, including the National Development and Social and Family Development Ministries, as well as the Early Childhood Development Authority and Skills Future Singapore. In an update today, Minister in the Prime Minister's Office, Maliki Osman, says the scheme has reached out to almost 2/3 of all Malay households in the 3 blocks where it's being piloted in Bedok, Geylang Serai and Jalan Besar. Census data released last June showed that the number of Malay households in 1- and 2-room HDB rental flats had more than doubled in the past decade to about 18,600 in 2020. The Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth will pump 20 million into sports after 2 years of reduced activity due to the pandemic. Called Bring Singapore Back, the plan aims to safely reintroduce mass participation events like sports festivals, ramp up community participation and optimize sports facilities to encourage people to return and play together.
2021 was a thoroughly exciting year for sports, despite the many uncertainties and challenges. We progressively resumed sporting activities and also hosted several international events. In 2022, we want to step it up. Like arts, sports is a social glue that brings us together as we cheer on our athletes fighting hard for Singapore, or as we develop friendships by simply engaging in a game or two on the field or on the court. We will commit 20 million to our Bring Sports Back program in 2022. This is designed to reinvigorate Singapore sports, bring people back to play and enjoy sports together, and through sports, reconnect with one another.
In other local news, HDB resale flat prices edged up for the 20th straight month in February by 0.6% compared with January's 1.1%. Resale volume dipped by 22% with an estimated 1,904 units changing hands. DBS CEO Piyush Gupta took home $13.6 million last year, a 48% jump from 2020. His pay consisted of a salary base of $1.2 million, a cash bonus of $5.2 million, and shares worth $7.2 million. A non-cash component worth some $75,000 was also part of his pay package. DBS delivered a record profit of $6.8 billion last year. A woman has been taken to hospital with injuries after a wild boar ran into her at the Khatib HDB block yesterday evening. The four-story block of flats has a row of shops on the ground floor, and eyewitnesses say the boar hit the glass display of a nearby optical shop after colliding with the woman and then ran off. According to Nee Soon South MP Kerry Tan, National Parks Board officers are searching for the wild boar in Yishun Park, which has been closed off. Lala, the first panda cub born in Singapore, is now with his mother inside Rivers Wonders main panda exhibit. With safe management measures in place, an average of 100 visitors can visit the giant panda forest at any one time. Staff are stationed at various points to ensure that guests have enough time to see Lala while keeping the queue moving. Well, I cannot wait to go and see him. In this week's Live Picks, we've got a new play, a local band, and lots of changes happening in the restaurant scene. Let's check in first with food correspondent Eunice Quek. Eunice, what is going on? I hear that One Altitude at One Raffles Place is closing down.
Yes, it's been a dining and nightlife institution for 12 years, so it is quite a pity. 12 years, I would say it's fairly long nowadays with all the changes that has been happening. But the good news is that the one group that owns One Altitude is launching a new concept called One Arden, and it is also in the CBD at the new skyscraper Capita Spring. Some of the eateries have already opened. There is Bee's Knees Urban Cafe, and there's also Latin European restaurant Soul and Luna. Now next month there are going to be more openings at One Arden, and they will be on the rooftop. So I think there will at least still be really stunning views as well, just like at One Altitude.
Okay, I'm certainly looking forward to that one. But Eunice, quick one before I let you go, before the new restaurant opens, do you have any other recommendations? Say a place that is hip, perhaps?
I think one of the hippest place to be right now is actually Roberta's at Marina Bay Sands. The famous pizzeria is actually from Brooklyn, New York, and it's really good vibes, and is known for their wood-fired pizza with this lovely blistered, thin crust. Even just the house-made bread alone with the salted butter was really, really good. It doesn't take reservations, so you do have to queue, and if it is crowded, I think it's actually a really good idea to take away the pizza, go for a nice picnic along the Marina Bay or over at the gardens.
Okay, I think I have my weekend plan right there. Thank you, Eunice. Food correspondent Eunice Quek. Next up, we've got a play that opens at the Victoria Theatre tomorrow, where live audiences can once again fill the entire theatre after 2 years of live show restrictions. Assistant live editor Olivia Ho is here to tell us more about the Glass Menagerie. Olivia, so tell us more.
This is a production by theatre company Pandemonium. It's going to run from tomorrow, March the 11th to March the 27th at the Victoria Theatre. The Glass Menagerie is by American playwright Tennessee Williams, in fact, one of the greatest American playwrights of the early 20th century. So it premiered in 1944. This is what is called a memory play. It's called a memory play because from the beginning, the narrator makes it quite clear that it's based on his own recollections, so it may not be precise. And these are his recollections of his mother, Amanda, who is this faded Southern belle who is trying to raise her 2 children in poverty after being abandoned by her husband, and as well as Tom's mentally fragile sister, Laura, who had a childhood illness and therefore she has a limp, and so she's quite socially insecure. So the cast for this adaptation are Jamal Schultz, Inch Chua, the singer-songwriter, Catherine Gardner, who is an American TV actress that's now based in Singapore, and Salif Hardy. And the Glass Menagerie is, despite being set in 1930 St. Louis, and it's very Southern, but for some reason it's been quite a popular classic in local theatre. We've had quite a few versions. Adrian Pang, the co-founder of Pandemonium, was himself in a 1996 production of this for the Singapore Repertory Theatre. So it's very interesting to see how this will be handled by Pandemonium's director, Tracy Pang, this time round. And like you said just now, it is notable that this is the first Pandemonium play that is going on at full capacity since the COVID-19 outbreak. It's not going to be subjected to seating capacity restrictions, just because they're fewer than 1,000 audience members. So this means that it would be possible for Pandemonium to fill all 614 seats at the Victoria Theatre. So I'm quite excited personally that we may be looking at what could be the first full house for Singapore theatre in 2 years.
I'm excited as well, Olivia. Thank you for that, Assistant Live Editor Olivia Ho. Well, the next one is a local pride. Local indie band Subsonic Eye will be performing in the US this June. Let's get more from music correspondent Dino Abdul Hadi. Hey, Dino, is this the first time that you know of a band that is touring the States?
Yes, I believe they will be the first Singaporean band to do an overseas tour since the pandemic hit. So I think this is quite significant. And it's also their first time touring the United States. And Subsonic Eye is an indie band who've made quite a name for themselves, not just locally, but in the region since they formed in 2016. So they have a bit of a regional presence. Besides gigs in Singapore, they've done tours in countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. All this before the pandemic, of course. But last year in October 2021, they became the first Southeast Asian band to perform on this online music series called KEXP at Home. So it's this online music series by a Seattle radio station, KEXP FM. So that performance exposed them to quite a few indie music fans in the US. Hence, the band decided that this would be the right time for them to go out there and play some shows. They also told me that a lot of their favorite bands are from the US, so it will be very cool for them to play in a place to get a sense of perspective of what the indie scene in the US is like. So the tour kicks off on June 11th in Los Angeles, and then they will play other major cities in the US, including Portland, Seattle, and New York. Yeah, and then the band told me that they are hoping that their tour, their presence there, will sort of emphasize Singapore on the international indie rock map.
Well, we wish the band all the best. That was music correspondent Dino Abdul Hadi. For more music picks, check out Dino's other story that's out today on homegrown singer Zairi. Now, he's the first singer from Singapore to have a song hit 100 million streams on Spotify. Read more about it at str.sg/live. Visit straitstimes.com for the latest news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. See you tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.